So we have all been there, right? You miss a deadline,
Hmm.
or maybe you forget a password to an account you haven't used in a few months.
Oh, constantly. Yeah.
Right, and usually it's just a minor headache.
Yeah.
Kick, forgot password, you pay a small late fee, and you just move on with your day.
It's an annoyance, but it's fine.
Exactly. But I want you to imagine for a second that missing a single email, or say forgetting to update an email address on a random administrative form, meant an entire hospital had to suddenly cancel a full day of scheduled surgeries.
Oh.
Yeah. Or imagine a patient who has been managing severe, debilitating chronic pain getting turned away at the pharmacy counter, completely empty-handed, all because a piece of digital paperwork lapsed at midnight.
I mean, it sounds like a dramatic exaggeration, right? But in the highly regulated world of healthcare administration, that is exactly the kind of chain reaction we see.
It's wild.
It really is. When one very specific, seemingly simple administrative task falls through the cracks, everything stops, and happens a lot more often than anyone inside the medical system would actually like to admit.
And that exact scenario is what we are exploring today. We are looking at this incredibly comprehensive guide provided by Remindax.
Right, the compliance tracking software company.
Yeah, exactly. And their research lays out this invisible, incredibly high-stakes bureaucratic thread that literally holds the United States healthcare system together. It's called the DEA Controlled Substances Registration.
Though anyone who works near a hospital just calls it the DEA license.
Right, the DEA license. So our mission for this deep dive is to really pull apart the mechanics of this system. We want to understand how this one single credential dictates the physical flow of strictly regulated medications across the entire country.
It's just a fascinating look at how federal law, complex medical supply chains, and, basic human error all just collide.
Totally. And if you're listening to this and you manage massive contracts in a totally different field, or if you're just fascinated by the hidden mechanics of complex systems, there are massive lessons here about compliance and risk.
Oh, absolutely.
We're going to see what happens when you combine incredibly high stakes, zero-tolerance compliance rules and the inherent danger of relying on someone's memory to keep the lights on.
Because relying on human memory is objectively the weakest link in any compliance chain. I mean, the source material makes that abundantly clear, especially when you look at how much power is actually vested in this one credential.
Okay, let's unpack this, because a DEA license is the ultimate legal gateway. Without it, it absolutely does not matter if a doctor is like the most renowned neurosurgeon in the country with a whole wall full of Ivy League degrees.
None of it matters.
Right. Without this specific federal credential, they cannot legally prescribe, administer, or dispense a single controlled substance. It's essentially a high-security clearance badge for the medical world. Just having a medical license is like being allowed in the building.
Yeah.
But the DEA registration is the key card to the vault.
I love the analogy because it really is a sweeping mandate. And what's fascinating here is that the source outlines it's not just your primary care physicians who need this.
Right, it's basically everyone.
Yeah, we are talking about dentists, veterinarians, podiatrists. It includes mid-level practitioners like nurse practitioners and physician assistants, assuming their specific state actually allows them prescribing authority.
Oh, wow.
But it goes beyond individuals, too. Pharmacies, entire hospital facilities, research laboratories, drug manufacturers, and even teaching institutions. Like every single node in the medical network has to be registered.
Wait, I want to pause on this redundancy for a second, because this is where a lot of people outside the medical field get confused. These professionals already have state medical licenses.
Right, they do.
So the state medical board has already investigated them, vetted their education, and declared, yes, this person is a highly qualified, ethical doctor. Why does the federal government need to step in and issue a completely separate credential just to let them write a prescription for, say, a Schedule II drug like fentanyl or Adderall?
It's a great question, and the distinction is crucial. The state medical board is evaluating medical competence. They are asking, can this person accurately diagnose an illness and formulate a treatment plan?
Okay.
The DEA, on the other hand, is entirely focused on supply chain security and diversion control.
Keeping the drugs off the street.
Exactly. They are asking, can this person be trusted to handle highly addictive, heavily regulated substances without those substances leaking into the illicit market? So they look at the different schedules, right?
Right. The guide mentions the DEA schedules, I through V.
Yeah, where Schedule 1 is for research only, like LSD or heroin, things with no accepted medical use.
And Schedule II holds the high abuse risk stuff, right? Like fentanyl and Adderall.
Precisely. All the way down to Schedule V, which is your lower risk stuff like cough syrups with a little bit of codeine. The federal registration dictates exactly which classifications you are legally permitted to interact with.
So the state clears your medical knowledge, but the federal government clears your security status.
You nailed it. And the federal system actually depends on the state level system first. You can't just apply for the federal DEA credential in a vacuum. You have to be cleared locally first.
Meaning you need the state license before you even fill out the federal paperwork.
Right. You need a valid state license authorizing you to handle controlled substances before the federal government will even look at your DEA Form 224 application.
And that application itself is a pretty significant hurdle. I mean, the guide notes the fee ranges from $731 to over $3,000, depending on what kind of registration you are getting.
Yeah, it's not cheap.
No, not at all. So you pay your fee, you do the paperwork, and you get your federal key card. A doctor might think they are completely set at that point. But this is the part of the source material that really stopped me.
The location rules.
Yes, the location trap.
Yeah.
Because the regulations introduce this massive operational nightmare for healthcare organizations. The license is not just tied to you as a human being.
No, it's very specific.
Right. Federal law dictates that a practitioner needs a separate DEA registration for each principal place of business where controlled substances are physically stored or dispensed.
Which trips a lot of people up.
Wait, so if a doctor practices at 3 different clinics across state lines, they might need 3 separate registrations, each with its own $3,000 fee and its own expiration date.
If they are physically storing and administering drugs at all 3?
Yes.
Absolutely.
That makes zero sense to me on a practical level. If I am a vetted, trusted doctor, why does the federal government care if I write a prescription or administer a drug in Clinic A versus Clinic B? My medical knowledge didn't change. I'm still the same doctor.
It feels incredibly counterintuitive, I know. But you have to look at it through the lens of a federal investigator. The DEA is not tracking your brain. They are tracking the physical movement of the pills.
Okay, tracking the physical assets.
Right. Think about it like a driver's license versus a car registration. Your state medical license is your driver's license. It clears you, the person, to operate the vehicle.
Oh, that makes sense.
But the DEA registration functions much more like a car registration. It is tied to a specific physical asset at a specific location to house the liability.
Okay, so they are really looking at the building itself, the physical drug vault.
Exactly. If drugs are physically delivered to and stored at 2 different clinics, the DEA needs a distinct, auditable paper trail for each specific drug vault.
Because if a box goes missing.
Right. If you could just use one blanket license for anywhere you go and a box of fentanyl goes missing, it becomes a jurisdictional nightmare to figure out where the leak actually occurred. Was it lost in transit? Was it stolen from Clinic A? By forcing a separate registration for every physical storage location, the DEA forces geographic accountability.
Okay, I get that. Though the guy does point out one exception. If a practitioner is just writing prescriptions at a secondary location within the same state, but they aren't actually storing the drugs there, they don't need a second license for that secondary office.
Correct. If there is no physical inventory to audit on site, the DEA is less concerned about the physical building. But the moment a clinic stocks inventory, it triggers the requirement. And the source makes a really critical distinction here between an individual practitioner's license and an institutional registration.
Right, which covers a whole hospital facility.
Yeah, a hospital holds its own institutional registration, which covers the nurses and staff administering medications from the internal pharmacy to admitted patients.
But an individual doctor working inside that exact same hospital still needs their own separate individual DEA registration if they want to write an outpatient prescription for a patient to take home. Right.
Exactly.
Just think about the sheer administrative weight of this. If you are a credentialing manager at a mid-sized hospital network, you aren't just tracking one expiration date per doctor.
Oh, not even close.
You have doctors covering shifts at the main hospital, doing rotations at a suburban surgical center, running a specialized pain clinic. You could easily be tracking hundreds of different overlapping timelines across multiple locations.
It is a profound administrative burden, and that burden transitions from an annoyance to a genuine crisis when we look at the validity cycle of these registrations, because the clock is incredibly unforgiving.
Let's talk about that ticking clock, because with all these overlapping timelines, what actually happens when the clock runs out? For almost everyone, it's a strict 3-year validity cycle, except for Schedule A researchers, which is annual.
Right, 36 months for most.
And the consequences of missing that renewal are staggering. Operating with an expired registration for even a single day is a federal violation,
There's no gray area.
and the penalty is up to $25,000 per violation, plus potential criminal charges and state board disciplinary action.
Yes. But fines are just the legal consequence. The operational ripple effect is what actually paralyzes a healthcare system.
So what does this all mean? Let's make this concrete. Say a multi-site clinic has a surgeon whose license lapses on a Tuesday at midnight. What actually happens on Wednesday morning?
The hammer drops immediately. If that surgeon has 3 complex orthopedic surgeries scheduled to begin at 8:20 a.m., those surgeries cannot proceed.
Because they can't order the necessary anesthesia protocol.
Precisely. The hospital pharmacy is legally bound by their own institutional registration. They cannot release fentanyl or propofol to a surgeon with an expired federal credential. If the pharmacist did, they would be risking the entire hospital's ability to operate.
Oh, wow.
So the pharmacist refuses the order, the anesthesiologist cannot induce the patient, the surgeon is grounded, and a patient who has been fasting and prepping for weeks is just sent home.
This isn't just about a hospital losing $25,000. It means a patient managing chronic pain suddenly gets turned away at the pharmacy counter because a doctor's paperwork lapsed. The human element here is brutal.
It is brutal. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to understand that this strictness is entirely by design.
How do you mean?
The DEA system is a deliberate public health safeguard. The core philosophy of the Controlled Substances Act is to maintain total, unyielding accountability over highly addictive substances. The DEA intentionally leaves no slack in the system because historically, slack is exactly where diversion, theft, and abuse happen.
Given these massive stakes, you would think the government would make it incredibly obvious when your license is about to expire, like a certified letter in the mail, giant red envelope.
You would certainly expect that.
But a recent policy change actually made it much harder. Here's where it gets really interesting. The Remindax guy points out a crucial pivot. As of June 2020, the DEA completely stopped sending paper renewal notices.
Completely eliminated them. Zero mail.
Everything is now electronic. They just email you at 60, 45, 30, 15, and 5 days before expiration, which sounds like a lot of warning, but email is incredibly fragile.
It introduces massive vulnerabilities because those emails are only sent to the specific address associated with the registration when it was last updated.
Which might have been 3 years ago. If an organization's registration is tied to the email of a former employee who left 2 years ago, those DEA warnings are just bouncing back.
Or consider corporate IT security. Healthcare systems employ incredibly aggressive spam filters. It is so common for automated government emails to get silently quarantined by the IT department. The reminders just vanish into the void.
And there's a critical deadline to hit, right? Submitting DEA Form 224A at least 45 days before expiration.
Yes, that 45-day mark is essential.
Right. Doing this triggers an automatic extension under 21 CFR 1301.36I, if I'm reading this right, meaning the doctor can keep prescribing even if the DEA takes 4 to 6 weeks to process the paperwork.
Exactly. It functions as a legal force field while the DEA processes the backlog.
But if you miss that 45-day window,
You are entirely at the DEA's mercy. If your expiration date arrives and they haven't finished processing your late renewal, you must stop prescribing immediately.
the irony is just wild. A $25,000 fine and the halting of medical care could come down to an unmonitored inbox.
It really could. And this raises an important question for healthcare administrators. How do you legally and functionally protect your organization when the primary safety net, that physical piece of paper in the mail, is completely gone?
Right.
I mean, the DEA does allow a 1-month grace period for reinstatement without forcing a brand new application, but you still cannot prescribe a single pill during that lapsed time. And if you miss that grace period, you're starting from scratch.
Which brings us directly to how modern organizations actually engineer their way out of this trap. Because relying on spreadsheets, shared calendars, or individual human memory creates massive blind spots.
Relying on a hero with an Excel spreadsheet means you are one sick day away from a critical compliance failure.
Exactly. The Remindax approach from the source material is basically moving to an automated solution. A centralized dashboard that acts as a single source of truth for every DEA registration across an organization.
Instead of different departments having conflicting lists, every single federal credential is aggregated into one secure interface.
And they discuss some really interesting best practices, like assigning clear ownership, so there's no ambiguity about who is handling the renewal.
And securely storing the certificates for instant audit readiness. That is crucial.
Oh, like for the Joint Commission.
Exactly. If an auditor walks in and wants to see proof of an active credential, a spreadsheet won't cut it. They want the verified document.
But the coolest part is replacing the DEA's emails with customized, tiered internal reminders starting 90 days out. Like 90, 60, 30, 15, and 7 days.
It creates an escalation protocol. It fundamentally shifts the organization from a reactive scramble to a proactive workflow.
Trying to track hundreds of overlapping DEA licenses on a spreadsheet is like trying to manage international air traffic control with a pack of Post-it notes.
I mean, it's not a matter of if a crash happens, but when.
Exactly. So, to you listening, I want you to consider the spreadsheets versus systems debate in your own profession. How much of your vital infrastructure relies on one person remembering to check an old email address?
It's a structural vulnerability in almost every industry.
It really is. Well, we have covered a massive amount of ground today. We've seen how a DEA license might look like just another piece of administrative paperwork, but it is actually the critical linchpin of legal, safe, and continuous patient care.
Absolutely.
Thank you for guiding us through this labyrinth of federal compliance. Makes you appreciate the invisible scaffolding holding things together.
It is always a pleasure, and I want to leave everyone with one final lingering thought to mull over, building on what we learned from the source.
Oh, definitely. What is it?
We've talked about what happens when a single doctor or clinic misses an email, but what happens to the national medical supply chain if a major pharmaceutical manufacturer or national distributor misses their renewal?
Oh, wow.
Could a single unread email caught in a spam filter temporarily freeze the legal movement of essential medications across entire regions of the country?
That is a staggering thought. A regional medication freeze over a bounced email. Definitely something to explore on your own. For now, I highly encourage you to audit your own critical expirations in life. Make sure your systems can survive human error. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we will catch you next time.